In the land that prides itself on freedom and opportunity, a grim reality persists. The United States is the deadliest nation for women to give birth among all developed countries. The staggering maternal mortality rates in the U.S. reflect not only a failure of its healthcare system, but also the insidious effects of systemic racism and an entrenched profit-driven healthcare model. It's an undeniable fact that giving birth in America is not only more dangerous, but shockingly lethal compared to other high-income countries. Today, we are going to delve into the alarming statistics, the structural causes, and the injustices inflicted upon women, particularly those of color, by a broken system. When we compare ourselves to the rest of the developed world, America's crisis is defined purely by numbers. According to a 2023 report by the Commonwealth Fund, the United States had a maternal mortality rate of 23.8 deaths per 100,000 live births in 2020, which of course increased to 32.9 deaths per 100,000 in 2021 during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. This figure, shockingly, is more than 3 times higher than the next closest developed nation and continues to trend upward year after year. To put this in perspective, countries like Germany, Australia, and the United Kingdom have maternal mortality rates of fewer than 10 deaths per 100,000 live births. The global outlier status of the United States when it comes to maternal health is even more damning when disaggregated by race. Black women in America die in childbirth at a rate of 55.3 per 100,000 live births. That is more than double that of white women and 3 times the rate of Hispanic women. For every statistic on maternal mortality, the discrepancies reveal a profound failure of the American healthcare system to protect the most vulnerable among us. Why do you think this is? Well, of course, the blame falls partially on the profit-driven model of our nation's medical industry. The United States healthcare system is structurally unique among developed nations for its heavy reliance on privatized for-profit care. Unlike countries with public health care systems that prioritize patient outcomes over corporate profits, the U.S. system incentivizes profit-making above all else. Hospital conglomerates, pharmaceutical companies, and insurance giants all benefit financially from prioritizing high-cost procedures and interventions, often to the detriment of patient safety and well-being. The result is a fragmented system in which even basic obstetric care is commodified and subject to the whims of the profit margins. Childbirth in the United States costs on average $18,865, with out-of-pocket expenses exceeding $4,500 for insured women. Uninsured or underinsured women can face bills surpassing $30,000. These costs are exponentially higher than those in other countries like Canada, the United Kingdom, or Sweden, where universal healthcare systems ensure that no woman must choose between her health and financial ruin. However, financial burden is only one facet of the for-profit system's failure. The profit-driven focus has also distorted the way maternal care is approached and delivered. The U.S. maternal healthcare system is plagued by a pattern of over-medicalization, most notably reflected in its high rates of cesarean sections. While C-sections can certainly be life-saving in certain circumstances, the United States performs them at a rate of nearly 32% of all births. That is significantly higher than the World Health Organization's recommended rate of 10 to 15%. The high prevalence of C-sections often stems from the economic incentives built into the system. Hospitals and doctors, quite simply, frequently receive higher reimbursements for C-sections than for vaginal deliveries, leading to an over-reliance on surgical intervention. And C-sections are not without risk. They carry higher infection rates, longer recovery times, and increased chances of future pregnancy complications. Yet for many hospitals, the allure of a shorter labor process with higher payouts has simply outweighed the commitment to patient-centered care. Next, we of course have to face the deadly combination of deep-rooted racism and unconscious bias that pervade every level of our healthcare system. The maternal mortality crisis in America is exacerbated by the fact that Black women are 3 times more likely to die from childbirth-related complications than white women. Let me say that again. Black women are 3 times more likely to die from childbirth-related complications than white women. And this is regardless of their socioeconomic status or education level. And let's be clear, this is not a result of a genetic predisposition or inherent vulnerability. It is a direct consequence of systemic racism and biases in healthcare delivery. Research shows that Black women's pain is constantly underestimated or outright dismissed by healthcare providers. A 2016 study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences revealed that a significant number of medical trainees held staggeringly false beliefs about biological differences between their Black and white patients, including the absurd notion that Black patients feel less pain. These deeply ingrained biases translate into unequal treatment and poor health outcomes for Black mothers. Moreover, Black women often face dismissive attitudes when they report symptoms. Take the case of Serena Williams, which is a high-profile example of this phenomena. Despite being one of the most prominent athletes in the world, Williams' concern about potentially life-threatening blood clots were initially dismissed by medical professionals following the birth of her daughter. It wasn't until she insisted on receiving a CT scan that doctors identified a life-threatening pulmonary embolism. If someone as influential as Serena Williams had to fight to be heard, what the hell does that say about the experiences of everyday Black women? It is essential to recognize that maternal health disparities are not solely caused by what happens within the walls of hospitals. Social detriments of healthcare, such as income, education, access to nutritious food, and safe housing, play a significant role in maternal health outcomes. In America, these detriments are heavily influenced by race and class, compounding the risks faced by marginalized women. For example, Black women are more likely to live in neighborhoods with environmental hazards, limited access to quality healthcare facilities, and inadequate public transportation. They are also more likely to experience stressors related to economic instability, which can contribute to adverse birth outcomes such as preterm labor and low birth weight. The cumulative effects of these social detriments create a cycle of disadvantage that perpetuates disparities in maternal health outcomes. For women of all races, particularly those from low-income backgrounds, access to prenatal and postpartum care is limited by a patchwork system of insurance coverage. While Medicaid covers nearly half of all births in America, coverage varies significantly by state. Some states cut off Medicaid postpartum coverage just 60 days after childbirth, leaving new mothers without essential follow-up care. This lack of comprehensive and continuous coverage contributes to maternal deaths from preventable complications like postpartum hemorrhage and infections, as well as long-term health issues such as unrelated and untreated mental health conditions and cardiovascular diseases. Expanding Medicaid coverage to at least 1 year postpartum, alongside comprehensive prenatal care, would provide a critical safety net for vulnerable mothers. Yet, efforts to expand coverage often face political resistance, further highlighting how the United States prioritizes profits and political agendas over the well-being of women and their families. Maternal mortality statistics often do not fully capture the scope of the crisis for new mothers, because they typically exclude maternal deaths caused by mental health conditions, which include suicide and overdose. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, mental health conditions are a leading cause of pregnancy-related deaths in America, with suicide rates being particularly high among women in the postpartum period. The lack of affordable and accessible mental health services only exacerbates this crisis, and stigma surrounding mental health often prevents women from seeking the help they so desperately need. To address America's maternal mortality crisis, sweeping reforms are needed at every level. First and foremost, the United States must adopt a healthcare system that prioritizes patient outcomes over corporate profits. Moving towards a single-payer universal healthcare model, similar to those seen in other developed nations, would ensure that all women have access to comprehensive, affordable maternal care. Furthermore, efforts must be made to dismantle the systemic racism embedded within healthcare institutions. Implicit bias training, increased diversity among healthcare providers, and stronger accountability mechanisms are all essential steps towards addressing racial disparities and maternal health outcomes. Finally, the expansion of Medicaid coverage, improved access to mental health services, and targeted interventions to address social detriments of health are all crucial to protecting the lives of mothers. These reforms would not only save lives, but would also promote a more equitable society in which every woman has the right to a safe and healthy childbirth experience. The maternal mortality crisis in the United States is a damning indictment of a nation that has long claimed to be a leader in human rights and progress. In reality, it is a country that allows profit and prejudice to dictate who lives and who dies. The failure of America's for-profit healthcare system, coupled with the effects of systemic racism, has created a perfect storm that disproportionately endangers the lives of women of color. If the United States is to shed its shameful status as the deadliest nation for women to give birth, it must confront the root causes of this crisis head on. Until then, America's maternal mortality crisis remains a national tragedy, one that could be prevented if only the lives of mothers were valued more than profits. And that, my friends, is the final word up front. I'm Sean Sainhart, and this is Coup Save America. My guest today is a social justice warrior who shines a light into the shadowy corners of our society. Mark Bello is an attorney, civil justice advocate, and an award-winning legal-themed novelist. He publishes eye-opening book series for both adult and child audiences. And we will welcome Mark to the show right after the break. We'll be right back. Mark Bello draws upon 42 years of courtroom experience, a passion for justice, and his creative writing style to pen captivating novels and children's books for his readers and hard-hitting commentaries on controversies in the news. Bello was one of the first attorneys to sue the Catholic Church over sexual abuse by clergy, an experience that inspired his debut novel, Betrayal of Faith. Through his ripped-from-the-headlines novels, he takes readers deep into the courtroom fights to protect our most precious rights and gives us a front-row glimpse into what victims face when standing up for justice. He recently released the 9th novel in his Zachary Blake legal thriller series titled The Anti-Semite Next Door, and a legal romance novel, Love, Hate, Law. Mark's children's book series teaches lessons on real-life subjects like bullying, distracted driving, and bicycle safety. Mark is also a host of the amazing The Justice Counts podcast, which is a deep dive into how the American legal system succeeds and fails in achieving rights and justice. The question is, how does he do it all and still find time to sleep? Well, let's bring Mark in and find out the answer to that question. Mark, welcome to the program.
I'm laughing at your introduction. I haven't been I haven't been sleeping much lately.
I don't know that any of us have, quite honestly. I want to ask you first and foremost, as a social justice advocate, is that the reason that inspired you to go into law in the first place, or is there a different story to that?
Well, like most lawyers, first I chose law as a subject to pursue for educational reasons. Most lawyers, after they finish law school, unless they have a real passion that they've discovered in class, which is usually, can I survive this? But if you're smart enough, and I wasn't, to have a particular passion in school, then maybe you pursue that post law school. For me, it was getting a job in a small law firm that specialized in seeking justice for the less fortunate, and that essentially is how I started in this career, and how it blossomed into what it became.
And what inspired you to transition from practicing law to writing novels and children's books?
Well, I'm 72 years old. I was slowing down. I was on the verge of retirement. I had handled the case that you mentioned back in the early 80s. And the challenge of the case, the way the church behaved,
Yeah.
the shocking cover-ups that were engaged in, and the payoffs that were made to people to keep their mouths shut, was shocking to me. The Archbishop of Detroit lied to me in a deposition, and he was somebody that was revered in the city and was a candidate for the papacy. And there he is in a local deposition, lying. Now, you might ask, how did I know he was lying? The answer is because I knew the truth. So it was easy to expose the lie, and it was a silly thing to lie about. But it was very disturbing to me. And I said to myself, you should write a book about this someday, almost flippantly, almost like, would I ever really do it? Because I was a lawyer, not an author. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, this is a compelling subject to write about. And I started to write some notes here and there and what have you. The issue exploded on the litigation scene. And despite my little case that happened in the 80s, one of the first that happened, or one of the first to be exposed at least, I think it predates all of us. But the explosion of the genre of litigation came in Louisiana when an attorney handled, I think it was 16 different clients who were the victims of one priest. And then you had the Boston, Massachusetts incident, which was the subject of the movie Spotlight.
Right.
By the time my book came about, this was quite an overexposed, if you will, topic. But I felt that it was for me, not for anybody else, to write an account of what happened. And different than the other books you may have seen on the issue. First of all, I thought it would be more compelling if it was fiction rather than fact, because it allowed me to embellish.
Right. Right.
It is not a factual account. It's an account of how it felt. Secondly, I wanted to talk about what it was like to litigate one of these claims, as well as what it felt to be a victim of one of these situations, both from the standpoint of a parent and hearing the heartbreaking news that this happened to your child, and secondly, from the standpoint of what it's like to be a litigant and an attorney in a case where you're David and Goliath is on the other side. The justice system is full of that. You mentioned in your introduction the healthcare system and the pharmaceutical system, and those are great examples of how Goliath preys upon the little Davids and Davidettes of society, especially as you mentioned in your introduction, the less fortunate. So I wanted to write a book about how it felt as a young. I was 30 years old when I filed this case. Law school, out of law school 5 years, on my own as an attorney for a year. And I was facing one of the top law firms in Detroit and a very, very deep pocket defendant in the Catholic Church. And the one nice thing about the system, or the one nice thing that the system does for a less fortunate person, is it allows them to hire an attorney on a contingency fee basis.
Right.
And they don't have to come out of pocket to pursue litigation. On the other side of that, the criminal side, unless they're really broke and qualify for a public defender, which is not always the best lawyer in America. So, and I'm not disparaging public defenders. Some of them are wonderful lawyers.
Well, they're overworked.
But they're overworked, underpaid, and they're facing, especially when they're pursuing civil cases, as well as defending themselves in criminal court, they're facing a system where all of the money and all of the power is on the other side of the case.
Right.
So I kind of wanted to write a book that demonstrated what it felt like. And that's what Betrayal of Faith became. I didn't release it till almost 30 years after the case I handled. And as I indicated, I sweetened it a bit with some of the stuff that readers like to see in legal novels.
Yeah. What do you think? And maybe I'm putting words into your mouth, but why do you think fiction is such an effective medium to explore real world system challenges?
Why do I think fiction
is an effective medium to explore real world justice system challenges?
Okay. I don't think it's any better than nonfiction. True crime novels are terrific. Documentaries are fascinating, and I enjoy both genres. I do think that the average person, and I may be oversimplifying, the average reader, let's say, wants to be entertained.
Yes.
At the same time they're being taught, or a better way to say it is to teach in secret. Entertain first, teach second. And I think my books are entertaining as well as they are lessons in how certain types of cases would be handled in the civil or criminal justice system. I think it makes it more compelling to embellish it a little bit.
I agree. And your novels are fantastic, by the way.
Thank you.
Fan.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Did not finish yet the Anti-Semite Next Door because I have a tendency on this program to do spoilers.
Okay.
And I didn't want to do that. But your book is absolutely fascinating. I want to ask you, where do you get the ideas? What kind of inspires you to write about the issues that you do? I mean, because you cover some really deep issues.
Well, the first one, as I indicated, was an actual case I handled. Almost every other novel, except for You Have the Right to Remain Silent, which is my 8th Zachary Blake novel, a whodunit. The other 9 are basically plucked from the news. An issue comes out in the news, like, for instance, the 2016 election. when I wrote Betrayal of Faith, it was a bucket list item. I was fulfilling something I promised myself I would do for 30 years. I really never contemplated writing a second novel. And then the 2016 election came along, and a presidential candidate emerged that seemed to be someone who had unconscionable beliefs, might have been a bigot, might have been anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim, and might, to my shock, at the time I said might, be elected president of the United States. And I decided to write a fictional account of what that presidential outcome might look like. What if we did have a president who wanted to deport all Muslims? What if we did have a president who exhibited the tendencies of a bigot? And of course, in 2016, Donald Trump was elected president of the United States. And the book came out before the election. And what I was trying to do was create a fictional character based on truth, similar to Betrayal of Faith, and suggest to people that certain things about a person's personality or rhetoric on the campaign trail ought to be disqualifying.
Yeah.
And what happened instead was I got accused on various social media platforms and podcasts of doing a, quote, hit job on the president. And I politely pointed out that I wrote Betrayal of Justice and finished it and published it before 2016. The presidential race hadn't been decided yet, and he hadn't done anything yet. So anything that my fictional president did, that Donald Trump ultimately did, would be on him, not on me.
Right.
My book was fiction. He chose to imitate some of the things I predicted that might happen if somebody like that were elected president of the United States. Fact just sometimes imitates fiction. To your introduction about healthcare in America and reproductive rights, the surprise to me, and I don't know how political your show is, and I don't say this from a Republican/Democrat standpoint. I say this from a human standpoint. What I don't understand about America is how we constantly shoot ourselves in the foot. You mentioned the cost of the healthcare system and that we have the most expensive system in the world. Well, along comes Barack Obama, and whether you like Obamacare or whether you don't, it was at least an attempt to reduce the cost of healthcare and make healthcare available to a wider variety of American citizens. And it succeeded at that. Not fantastically. It's not socialized medicine. It's not Medicaid as you described it for all. You seem to be an advocate of that. I'm more of a capitalist, but I'm certainly an advocate for the less fortunate to be covered in all situations. And as a person of some means, I'm not the wealthiest man in America. I'm not even sure I would describe myself as wealthy, but I'm certainly willing to have my taxes go to help someone else who might need the care that I can afford to pay for.
Right.
Yet, this same segment of our voters voted for the guy that is contrary to their interests and promised to end Obamacare, promised to end reproductive freedom,
And did.
and and then they voted for him again. And again, we could have a whole long discussion about the hypocrisy and schism of common sense in America, but and I get. I mean, I think I've made it clear who I voted for. I get the anger. I get why people are looking for alternative choices. I listened to one of your podcasts. I don't remember what the guest name was, but she was advocating for more parties and more candidates and more choices. And I agree 1,000%. I'd love to see a wider variety of candidates, although I think the more candidates you get, the more chances you'll have of the bad guy winning. But we have to acknowledge that more than 50% of America right now chose that guy. And my question to America is, when it's obviously against your best interest, why? Why would you vote for the guy that took away your reproductive freedom? Why would you vote for the guy if you're Latino who wants to deport your brothers and sisters? He even wants to deport people who are here legally.
Yeah, naturalized citizens.
I read an article the other day that Haitians are fleeing Springfield, Ohio, in fear, and they were here legally. Everything about them was false. Said about them was false.
Yep.
And yet they're fleeing in fear. I kind of always felt, and I write this in the blogs that I write. I write blogs for two different newsletters, one my own and one a little paper called Lean to the Left. But as a Jewish citizen, I look at any minority citizen as somebody who could be Jewish. Yesterday's Jew is today's Haitian. And if you're Jewish and you support a guy that wants to treat Haitians the way Trump and Vance did, then you're almost anti-Semitic. I don't think my Jewish brethren would support my statement, but hate is hate, and I think about the Martin Niemöller poem a lot. When they came for me, no one was left to. And I think about the words on the Statue of Liberty, and that's what our country used to be about, and it doesn't seem to be about that anymore. And I'll get off my soapbox.
No, please. This is a fascinating discussion, and I agree. I don't know the answers. He won the popular vote. I was not expecting that.
I agree with you. You look at the map, and there are so many red states, guaranteed wins for him, that the Republican always has a chance to win. And if you look at history, I think it's almost 50-50. on Republican and Democratic presidents. But this is a move, a right swing move that I, for one, didn't see coming. And I thought she had a very good message of hope and let's move on. Let's try to do this together rather than divided. The one thing I would say is that a legitimate criticism is that nobody elected her to do anything.
Right.
She didn't receive a single vote, and I think that hurt her. I think the Democrats did her a disservice by essentially anointing her the candidate.
Yeah.
Even after Biden dropped out, I think they should have had a process by which either the party or the people selected someone rather than having her essentially appointed to be the candidate.
Yeah.
There are more things they did wrong, but that's to me was the number one.
I mean, Biden should never have run for a second term. I mean, dropping out when he did really did a disservice to the party as well.
Yeah, but my problem with Biden, I agree with you. My problem with criticizing Biden is I think his so-called decline was more verbal than it was mental. His decision making all throughout his presidency was, in my opinion, good for the country. I think he might have, from the standpoint of the border, I think he might have been tougher on immigration than I expected him to be.
Yeah.
That might surprise some people, but because they think he was an open border guy. The border's a tough issue because there's the law and there's compassion, and the law and compassion don't always see eye to eye. But I thought he handled the border much more strictly than I expected him to.
Yeah.
And Obama did too.
Oh yeah.
Trump rhetorically talked a big game, but his practice, a lot of immigrants ran in fear. I don't think he did anything specifically other than starting to build a wall that Mexico never paid for.
They haven't paid for it yet, but they're
not
going.
Yet, not yet. A friend of mine and I were talking on the phone the other day, and he threatened to build a wall between Canada and America and have America pay for it. I thought that was pretty funny. But anyway, I don't remember the question, but the book was kind of a parody on what we might expect. That book, by the way, is called Betrayal of Justice. And it looks at a presidency where a president behaved in a bigoted, self-interested, narcissistic, money-grubbing manner. It was I deliberately embellished the character, and then, to my shock, he mimicked him. It was something I just didn't expect, and like I said, I got criticized for it, and my stock answer was always, "My guy came first." Who imitated who?
Do you think, given your expertise, do you think it's fair to call Donald Trump a fascist?
Somebody would have to read me the definition of a fascist. If I I'd have to hear the definition, the specific definition of the word. That's probably easy to do. We could go online right now and get a definition. But the answer is I think yes. If you I got another friend. I have a lot of Republican friends, and I constantly answer. I constantly defend myself with them by saying this is not about Republican or Democrat.
Right.
This is about this particular person. He behaves in ways that no other president has behaved. You might argue that Nixon was as arrogant and egocentric as this guy is, and had an inability to look himself in the mirror and say, you know, what I'm doing is wrong, and couldn't. But I've never encountered in my 72 years a president like this. And I tell my Republican friends, it isn't about supply side economics. It isn't about the abortion issue, even though I strongly believe in the right to choose. It's about telling my grandchildren that they should look up to the President of the United States. And I can't tell my grandchildren that.
Yeah.
That's a simple issue for me. It's not a political issue. It's not what does he believe in? What does the other guy believe in? Let's make a choice based on that. In the Jewish religion, there's a word that has transcended, like some of the Yiddish words have, and become an English word as well as a Yiddish word. And the word is mensch. Joe Biden is a mensch. Donald Trump is not a mensch. And for me, it's just that simple. Now, you could criticize Biden's policies on this, that, and the other thing, and maybe behind the scenes, he's not as nice a guy as he appears to be. But when he goes on television and gives a speech, or he embraces somebody who's suffered a hardship and gives them a hug and gives them a genuine, warm greeting, you can say to your grandchildren, that's the President of the United States. You can respect that. You can be proud that he's your president. And for me, you can't do that with Donald Trump, whether you like his policies or not. I still don't understand what that means.
Right. Well, I don't know that he has any policies.
Well, and that's my point. What policies? I hate you. I hate you. I hate you. And I'm going to do harm to each and every one of you. That's my policy. I'm going to take away this. I'm going to take away that. That's my policy. And if you help me, if you're Elon Musk and you help me win, well, then I'll support you making another $1 billion. I don't know. I said to myself, I'm not going to sound bitter when I do this podcast, but I guess I can't help it.
Well, I mean, there's every reason to be bitter. I mean, we're witnessing the collapse of so many things, and it's confusing, it's frustrating, and it's frightening. Let me ask you, as an attorney who's got intimate knowledge and experience with the justice system, I have a couple of questions on this front, actually.
By the way, but before you ask me the question, that's the other thing that really pisses me off, is this whole concept that everybody kept saying, quote, nobody is above the law.
Right.
And I have to tell you that that's not a new phrase. That's a phrase I've been hearing from judges for the 50 years I've practiced law. And I'm sure my predecessors have heard it well before that. And what happened this time, without a doubt, is the justice system just proved that somebody is above the law.
Yeah.
He delayed, denied, confused, and refused for so long, and Merrick Garland let him do it, that he basically avoided justice. And had he done his job, Garland, as quickly as he should have, we might not be in this mess today.
Yeah. Well, that was going to be my question. How in the man has been accused of rape. He's been
found guilty, not accused
of that. Well, I mean, he's been accused of rape by other people as well.
Let me take that back. Found responsible.
Found responsible.
He wasn't found guilty in a criminal court.
I mean, his whole grab them by the pussy comment should have been, I mean,
for everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely mind-boggling. Anybody else, that would have been the end of their political career.
That's what that's where I got to give it to him. You got to hand it to the guy that he can do the things he does and say the things he does, and still garner over 50% support from the American people.
Well, the more indictments that came out against him, the higher his approval rating seemed to have gone.
Well, because people thought it was a hit job, and to some degree that might be true. But again, you haven't asked me this question as a lawyer, but and it's hard to answer without actually seeing the evidence. But did he appear to be guilty of the crimes he was charged with? And when you see a phone call that says "Find me 11,000 votes," that sure looks like tampering to me. When you see him give a speech and thousands of people descend on the Capitol and kill somebody, and you instigated it, I'm surprised they never charged him with felony murder. Are you familiar with the felony murder statute?
No, not entirely. No.
If you're guilty of a felony, any wrongdoing that amounts to a felony, and a murder takes place, you're guilty of murder. So if you look at his behavior as inciting an insurrection, and that is a felony, and I'm not saying that he's reached the legal standards of that, but I think that there was a potential for him to be charged with felony murder, because an insurrection or participation in an insurrection is treason, or committing treason and that's a felony. So I'm surprised that he was undercharged. The documents case was a serious case. Yeah. And you had all those documents sitting in his bathroom, and all of it's going to go away because he was reelected, and that to me is a terrible injustice. But we did it to ourselves. One thing I'll say is that I'm a citizen of America, and the voters voted, and he won, and we have only ourselves to blame now. I got a kick out of a comment. Somebody said to me, "Do you believe the cabinet choices that he's made?" And I said, "Who did you vote for?" And they said, "Trump." And I said, "You got what you voted for. That's what he said he would do. One thing about him is he does what he said he'll do." And they voted for him anyway. But that cracks me up. Do you believe what he did today? Yes, I believe what he did today.
Do you think that we can survive 4 years of Trump as a country?
I think we can survive 4 years of Trump. I don't think we can survive in our current form with a continued swing that far to that type of politics. I wouldn't even say it's right. You've got a comment here that says Trump is
Trump is
working for
working for
Jesus.
Yeah.
Boy, John, I beg to differ with you.
Jesus protected Trump's ear.
I don't think Jesus would like Trump at all.
Yeah, I agree.
And I don't think Jesus would treat immigrants the way Trump has.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%.
He now says Jesus protected Trump's ear. He didn't protect his ear; he protected the rest of him.
Good point. What do you think is? I mean, I just read today that the district attorney or the prosecutors in Trump's New York case, which was a criminal conviction, has agreed to delay sentencing. Do you think anything will come of that case at all? I mean, he's been found guilty.
I think it depends on who's in office 4 years from now. If it's an Alvin Bragg disciple, then yeah, I mean, if somebody makes a commitment to pursue what we so curtly call justice, today justice has a whole new meaning.
Yeah.
But by the way, the justice has always been the term equal justice. Is a good soundbite, but I don't think there's ever been real equal justice in America. A person who can afford a lawyer, the best lawyer. The O.J. Simpson trial was a good example of that. You finally had a black man who could actually afford to hire the best attorneys around. And that's why so many people, even though they thought he was guilty, celebrated the outcome. But most people of color don't have the means to hire the best lawyer. Most people accused of crimes, especially blue-collar crimes, do not have the means to hire the best lawyers out there.
Right.
Or
any lawyer.
Justice is not equal. As nice as it sounds. I mean, there's positives to the system. You have the right to remain silent. If you can't afford an attorney, the system will appoint one for you. And oftentimes it's a pretty good lawyer. But is he the best lawyer? No. If you want to hire Johnny Cochran, you got to pay for Johnny Cochran.
Right.
God rest his soul.
Yeah.
No one's hiring Johnny Cochran anymore.
Do you think that? I mean, it's so puzzling, this whole phenomenon that we're experiencing. I mean, is it fair to say that billionaires bought this election?
Is it fair to say that
billionaires bought this election?
I would say not. I would say that anger, frustration, attitude, billionaires could have bought the election in 2020 and did not succeed. Billionaires could have bought the election in 2016 and did not succeed. He only succeeded by the skin of his nose.
Right.
That's this really sad part. If he loses in 16, you never see him again. But I'm not going to say that money didn't impact the outcome, but I think that this outcome was so decisive. All three so-called vital swing states went to Trump, not by huge numbers. And Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania are still very divided. Michigan where I'm from, has an extremely popular female governor. A lot of people wanted her to run for president. But there's an anger in this country. There's the left, not moderates on both sides, but the left is running the country and making decisions. And I question the truth of that, but I think that had a lot to do with the outcome of the election, much more so than the money that was spent, because both sides had a lot of money.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that was the other thing that happened in the other podcast I listened to, that your guest indicated that until we take money out of politics, we're going to have this kind of election for the foreseeable future. After Citizens United, I don't see how you're going to ever take money out of politics.
Yeah,
but it would be nice to be able to. I think one way to do it is to change things, is to shorten the period. The election, the quote election, should start maybe 4 to 6 months before November, rather than 2 years.
Yeah, I agree.
Especially in Congress, you have people elected, and the following January they're running for office in 2026.
Yeah,
they're already fundraising.
Yeah,
local elections are costing millions of dollars. The Slotkin-Rogers race in Michigan, I forget what the figure was, but it was millions and millions of dollars. The Democrat won. She was a much better candidate, and she won by the skin of her teeth. And that also tells you that something's going on in America that transcends money.
Do you think? Well, let me ask you. Earlier, you said that the left controls the country. Can you elaborate on that?
The perception.
The perception
of right-leaning voters,
right,
is that they're being dictated to by people on the left. I don't want my kid to go to school with a transsexual.
Right.
Oh, okay. 0.03% of America is transsexual. 0.03%. Then take that 0.03%, and how many of them are in this situation where someone's going to school with somebody else? And it for me, it creates this us versus them.
Correct. Yes.
Mentality that Trump used very successfully. It's the transgenders' fault. It's the illegal immigrants' fault. It's the left-leaning. It's the left, the outrageously left-leaning Democrats' fault that things are bad for you. It's the Haitians' fault in Springfield, Ohio. They're taking your jobs. What job did you want that they took? In Arizona and California, we're talking about agricultural jobs that Americans have clearly demonstrated that they don't want. And California farmers, American farmers, literally have to recruit in foreign countries to get people to work on their farms. So no jobs are being taken by people, and citizenship is earned. Nobody hands them citizenship.
It's very hard too.
Yes. Now, are there people that cross the border illegally? Yeah. Should we deport people that do that? Yeah. James Langford wrote a bill. A Republican from Oklahoma wrote an immigration bill that was pretty tough on immigration, and Donald Trump killed it because he thought it would hurt his
chance of
election chances. So who's serious about immigration? The Republicans or the Democrats? I don't think either of them are tremendously successful or serious about fixing the problem. But that bill went a long way toward doing it, and it'll now get passed in the Trump administration, and he'll take full credit for it.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
It was a bipartisan bill, one of the very few that we've been able to pass in the last 12 years or so.
Yeah, probably going back even further than that.
Well, it goes all the way back to probably Bush 2.
Yeah. Why do you think America is so polarized right now?
Because there's such a huge difference in political philosophy. Again, getting back to conversations I've had with my Republican friends, unlike most people, I can talk to them, but I disagree with them wholeheartedly. Right. They're just most of the issues at my age, when you talk to a Republican, most of the issues are economic. And there are some common sense to smaller government and protecting your savings and guarding against inflation and the decreasing value of your money. I don't know that Republicans have specific answers to these problems, but at least they talk a better game about it. Until Trump. Trump might as well be a Democrat the way he spends money. It used to be that the Republican would only spend money on the military, on defense. Today's Republican, it's just a blank check. Whatever Trump wants, Trump gets. And he wants a lot. How much did they spend on that wall?
Yeah.
What Republican in your lifetime, you're younger than me, what Republican in your lifetime would have supported that wall before Trump?
Yeah, I can't think of any. I mean, George W. Bush didn't build a wall. I think he mentioned a wall at one point,
but
he didn't
found funds for it.
Yeah,
public funds. They're not going to blow up the budget for a wall. So it just this is not your father's Republican Party.
Oh no, absolutely not. There's no question about that. I kind of want to ask you, how do you think that the justice system is holding up under the current political climate in the United States?
It depends on what branch of the justice system you're talking about. I think the immigration system needs the kind of legislation that is going to be passed. I think that's vitally necessary. And by the way, we talked about compassion and the law. We're talking about two different things, because I'm certainly not suggesting that this law is a compassionate law.
Right, because it's not.
But what it does is it provides certainty. It provides much more black and white rather than the current shades of gray that we have. And a person sets foot in America and can't speak English, and someone says to them, "Why are you here?" And the person says, and I'm making this up, but just to give you an example, my uncle is here, and 2 of my kids are here, and I want to be reunited with my family. And the official says to him, "You can't stay here if that's your reason. Your reason is that you're fearing persecution in your mother country. Are you fearing persecution in your mother country?" And the person says, "Oh, yeah, I'm fearing persecution in the mother country." If you're coming here, come here legally. Come here with an appropriate reason. And by the way, that first reason is appropriate. My uncle's here with my 2 kids. That's an appropriate reason. But come here legally and do it right. Get a green card. I don't practice immigration law, so I don't know the exact process, but do it right. You might want to have there was a great immigration lawyer that I interviewed on Justice Counts. You might want to have her on your show. I can't think of her name. I can't think of her name, but if you want, I'll go through the archives and get it for you. But there is a right way and a wrong way, and what this bill does is give you the black and white as to how you do the right way and how you do the wrong way. And if you do it the wrong way, you're going to get sent back. And for me, what that does, I'm not hawkish at all, but what it does is it tells the immigrant that if they come here, they better come here the right way or don't bother coming. And I think that's a good thing.
We also have a huge number of refugees flooding into the country that are fleeing for their lives. A lot of it has to do with our foreign policy. There's global warming that's a huge impact that's driving immigration.
Yep.
How do we address those issues in specific?
Well, again, for me, compassionately. For hardliners, much less so. If you're not going to address it at the border, then address it through aid. And that's the other hypocrisy.
Yes.
They won't help these countries. Surprise, they just showed up at our border. You got to do one or the other.
Yeah, I agree 100% on that. Yeah, it's really hard because there's so much suffering that is going on in the world, and
there's suffering going on in America too.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to say that,
and that's part of the problem. There's the us versus them problem again. You're not helping me. Why are you helping them?
Right.
They're not even Americans. And how do you help everybody? By raising taxes. Who wants to pay more taxes? Nobody.
Well, I mean, Trump wants to reduce taxes on corporations to, I think, 16%, I think is the last figure that was thrown around.
And he already did it once.
And I mean, that's fundamentally unfair. I mean, corporations ought to be paying their fair share of taxes.
Again, I agree. What I don't know is what's a fair rate. I never had a corporation that paid at the levels we're talking about because I never made that kind of money. I might have paid in the 20% range here and there on a good year. I never reached the 26% range. But while that sounds like an enormous tax rate, especially compared to other civilized countries, we're also talking about an enormous amount of money that the people who are benefiting from this earn. And whether you're going to help them through the government or help them philanthropically through a charity you create or whatever, you can avoid taxes by doing things charitably.
Correct.
And some of the very wealthy argue that they'd rather pick and choose what charities they want to support. And that may be a legitimate argument for a lower tax rate. But I don't think you can accept a lower tax rate and then not provide charity. The whole trickle-down theory was premised on the wealthy getting wealthier and creating jobs for the middle class. And what we found as that was going on was that they were putting the money in their pocket.
Right.
I mean, were some jobs created? Sure. But for the most part, the rich got richer. And that's what the problem was with trickle-down economics.
Yeah, I agree. And both parties are complicit in that neoliberalism that we've seen that has decimated the middle class almost entirely.
Well, and keep in mind that when we were talking about earlier about money in politics, the Democratic Party takes money from billionaires too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to talk to you.
Nobody has clean hands. That's for sure.
No, and that is, I think, part of the problem, and I think that's part of the appeal of Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump presents himself as a populist. Now, of course, we both know that that's not the case. He's not a populist in any sense of the word, but he does present himself as a populist, and he comes on the scene saying, "Here are the problems. I feel your pain," which again, he does not feel your pain whatsoever. He is, if anything, the source of your pain. But he was able to speak a narrative that resonated with a lot of Americans.
He can sell it. It's mind blowing to me. You remember in Poland when Lech Walesa was elected?
Vaguely, yes.
He was a anti-communist working class guy, and he was elected for that reason, that populist reason. Along comes America, and a multi-billionaire tells an auto worker that he feels their pain, and Biden's trying to take away their job, and they believe it. At the same time, he's accepting millions, perhaps billions of dollars from Elon Musk. What does Elon Musk do for a living, among other things? He sells electric cars, the cars that Trump says he's going to ban. You can't make this. That's why I write novels based on fact, because you can't make some of this stuff up.
Yeah, no, it is. We are living in very mind-boggling times right now.
It's incredible.
And I think a lot of people have lost the ability to make sense of it. I know I'm one of them. I've lost all ability to rationalize what is happening in America. And to be fair, around the world, I mean, if you look around the world, right-wing extremism is flourishing right now.
And how can you not, as a moderate, make a compelling case against that? And that's where I'm very critical of Democrats. I can't believe that they've lost to this guy twice. You have to be able to reach 78 million people voted for Joe Biden in 2020. 69, I think, voted for Kamala Harris. Why did she lose almost 10 million votes? What was she saying differently?
Well, I think that's a key issue. I think she wasn't saying anything differently.
maybe so.
I think that I mean, one of the mistakes that I think that she made was touring the nation with Liz Cheney. I mean, she really pivoted to the right on a lot of issues, and I think she didn't counter that populist rhetoric that we're hearing from Donald Trump.
Well, but I'm going to push back a little bit. When you say pivoted to the right, if pivoting to the right on you can't have a criminal president is pivoting, I think Cheney on that one issue pivoted to the left.
No, I would agree with that. That's
I don't know that anything Harris said or did. A lot of our issues, a lot of the issues that I thought were what the pundits call kitchen table issues, a lot of them I thought were less resonant than I thought they'd be. I thought abortion and the reproductive rights would be a big issue for women.
I did,
and it didn't happen. I didn't think the economy was all that bad. Yes, there was inflation, but there was also a corresponding rise in wages that was almost completely ignored. If you look at the numbers from 2020 to today, I think wages by a small margin have outpaced inflation. Yet, the Democrats did not have a solid, winnable response to the rhetoric that inflation was, quote, out of control, unquote.
Well, part of the problem too is we got 66% of the country living paycheck to paycheck, and I think to them, when they look at that, I think that their perception is, no, the economy is not working for me.
And go back to 2016. Was it working for them then?
No, and I think that's the problem. I think that no matter which,
so why vote for him?
I think it's, well, I think you hit it on the nail earlier. I think it's anger.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of anger and there's a lot of frustration, and I don't know how we overcome that. I mean, Democrats have to do a better job of working for the people and expressing a narrative and a message that I think resonates.
I would just like to see the Republicans grow a set.
Yeah.
And put forth a viable candidate that cares about America and not about himself, and wins without lying or cheating or pitting us against each other.
Yeah.
And I don't see that happening anytime soon.
No, the Republican Party is Trump's party. I mean,
if Trump serves 4 years, I think Vance is the next candidate.
Yeah.
And he's mini Trump.
Yeah.
He's the Michael Myers of politics.
I mean, I guess there's some hope. I mean, I think that people are going to find, even people who voted for Trump, I think are going to be very dissatisfied.
Oh, absolutely.
With what happens. I think the economy is going to worsen. I think the whole deportation thing is going to backfire on Republicans in major ways. I think that Trump's war hawkishness is going to backfire because, I mean, a lot of his base is anti-war. Trump is not anti-war.
No. What we might see is a new president every 4 years.
Yeah.
The people will just continue to get angry. And throw the bombs out will be the mantra. The interesting thing about this election was, after threatening to deport all Muslims and implement a travel ban, he then goes to Dearborn, Michigan, appeals to them that Israel is committing atrocities in Gaza, and they vote for him. Then he appoints pro-Israel
Yeah.
cabinet members, and the Muslims raise their hand and say, well, wait a second. We voted for you because you said, and those are a group of people that I respond, what did you expect? He did it to you before, he'll do it to you again.
Yeah.
He doesn't like you.
Do you think there's a viable chance of Democrats taking back the House? And I mean, I don't think that they're going to take that back to the Senate, but in 2 years in the midterms, do you think that there's a chance that Democrats will take back the House?
I think there's a very good chance. And again, it's what we've been talking about. It's anger. He's going to piss everybody off by doing exactly what he promised to do. And again, it's back to that point I made earlier about Haitians and Jews. Yesterday's Jew is today's Haitian. When they come for you, then suddenly you're on your high horse. And because they were coming for someone else, it was okay.
Yeah.
And they're going to come for them, and then they're going to turn on them. At least that's, my layperson's, political layperson's view of what's going on right now. There's a lot of disenchantment and outright hate and us versus them stuff. And when them becomes us, when you become them, you're going to vote for the other guy.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's going to happen in 2026. Not that far. It's not that far away.
No, it's not. But it's going to seem like a long time.
And he can do a lot of bad things before then, and he's arrogant enough to do that. He won't listen to me or you.
Yeah. Well, come on. If I can get him to listen to your podcast,
you, he listens to you. Okay. I'm sorry I put myself in your class.
No. If I can get him to listen to your podcast, you might have a shot.
I might be on a hit. We might be on a hit list. Who knows?
Yes. Oh, I'm sure I'm on a list.
Okay.
I'm sure I'm on his list.
I would be honored to be on the list.
Yeah. Well, you might be very much as well on the list. I mean, it's probably a long list, though, so we probably don't have to be too worried too soon. Speaking of your podcast, what inspired you to create a podcast? It's a great podcast, by the way.
Well, the podcast was kind of the same as the books. It was a person who worked from 7 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock or later at night, almost every day, raised a family, left the office for Little League games and so on, and family events, and then went back to the office, suddenly finding himself with time on his hands and a lot of shit happening that he wanted to talk about. The whole process, for instance, of appointing Supreme Court justices and the hypocrisy and political ingenuousness, if that's a word, of the system. When McConnell held up Merrick Garland's appointment,
yes,
and then appointed Coney Barrett in 5 seconds, shit like that pisses me off, and it's a podcast, as you've discovered, I'm sure, is somewhere where you can vent, and sometimes find like-minded people to vent with.
Yeah.
My most interesting podcasts were people that I would debate those issues with. There's a lawyer named Kelly. I I can't think of her last name. She's going to be, if she's listening to this, she's going to be pissed at me. But she's a she's a pro-life Republican.
To be fair to you, I cannot remember names for the life of me either. So don't.
I'm one of those people. Andrew Carnegie tells you to shake hands with somebody and repeat their name. And I shake hands with somebody, repeat their name, and 3 minutes later, I go to my wife. I lean over to my wife and I say, "What is his name?"
Yeah,
I'm terrible at that.
Yeah, me too.
But
So
but the podcast allows me to have conversations like this about the issues of the day, especially the legal issues of the day, and bring to light some things that maybe people aren't specifically aware of.
Yeah. My producer was most infatuated with your episode on reform and probation, and it had to do with photography. I'm forgetting the term for it.
She said that to me off the air, and I'm having a 72-year-old man moment and trying to remember the specifics of the podcast. She listened to it recently, and I must have done it 2 years ago. I remember it, but I don't remember the specifics of it. Probation and sentencing in general is a very hot topic.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, yesterday's crime, like pot possession, is not a crime today. And there are people who served 20 years and were ineligible for probation.
Participatory photography was the subject matter.
Say again?
Participatory photography and probation was the subject matter of that podcast episode.
I don't remember the participatory photography element. I remember discussing probation and sentencing inequity with a guest, but I don't know where the photography. Bring her back. Maybe she can help. Is she here?
Yeah, Mackenzie, come on in. She's gonna hate this.
Mackenzie,
sorry. Oh,
talk to me about photography. Refresh my memory.
Yeah, that was one thing I was going to ask you about when that episode had come out, because there's no dates on your podcast page.
Okay.
But yeah, so the participatory photography was.
It's hard to say.
Yeah, it is a hard one to say. I mean, the episode itself was about probation and the need for reform. The guest you had on had begun back in the days of film projects. I believe it was the housing development or the housing crisis that initiated this. But participatory photography was where he, in the probation realm, it had started in other places. But he gave cameras to probationers and to law enforcement, and everybody was able to record their experiences, what was happening with them. And
are you talking about Bill? Are you talking about Bill Steele?
You know what? I don't remember the name, but it's up on my.
Nobody here can remember names.
Okay. Well, Bill Steele was a former convict who, when he got out of prison, started to produce true crime movies and videos, and it might have been part of that.
No. This guest was named Jonathan Fisher. And a documentary was created and a book was written from how probationers recorded. This is what my experience is like while I'm on probation. And likewise, and I think they recorded it in photographs and also like reflections, some sort of input about their experiences. And then likewise on the law enforcement side, they were also invited to take photographs and to say, hey, this is what we're seeing. This is what I'm seeing. This is what our side is seeing. And basically,
I just don't
yeah,
remember I don't
the
remember
system didn't work for anyone.
Wow.
So
I
that's what
remember the
happened.
name. I remember the name Jonathan Fisher, but I don't remember the episode.
Well, maybe we'll get him on this show. If
Get him
we're
on that show, and I'll come on too.
Yeah, okay, I'm going to pop back out now, but go
All
on
right.
talking about the problems we have in our probation system.
Everybody who's listening and watching, this is Mackenzie.
Yes.
Yeah,
this is Mackenzie.
How many people have met Mackenzie? How often does Mackenzie appear?
Oh, way too often.
Way too often. Okay.
For someone who's supposed to be behind the scenes, way too often.
All right. You're probably the best thing that happened to this place.
Yes, she is. Believe me, she absolutely is.
All right. Well, good night, everyone.
I'm gonna try to resurrect that episode, and I'll write you an email.
Okay.
Send me an email so I can respond to it.
Yeah.
And I'll get you his contact information.
Okay.
Oh, perfect. That would be great. Thank you.
All right.
So yeah, what are the problems with our probation system?
Well, the problem with probation is sentencing. Probation itself, very much like we talked about earlier, and I wasn't a criminal lawyer, so I'm talking as an educated layperson, is very much like the pro bono or city attorney appointed counsel problem. They have too many cases and
Right.
too few hours. So they're trying to manage a bunch of people on probation, find them jobs, find them placements, make them report, etc., with too little resources. But the other problem is, more importantly than probation, because typically people on probation have served their time for the most part and have done something good to get put on probation. But the other problem, much more serious than that, is over-sentencing people for small time crimes. And possession of, pot or other narcotics is a great example of that. Possessing drugs is not something that is harmful to society. Attempting to sell what you possess is the harm-causing event. Sometimes possession is a reduced crime from trying to sell. I acknowledge that. But if you're found guilty of possession and you're over-sentenced, then you come out a hardened criminal or a hardened convict rather than a rather innocent little shoplifter type crime that puts you in prison for a long time. And that's kind of what I was referring to earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you tackle so many of these issues in your novels too.
Yes.
Policing, issues with policing. I want to put up Mackenzie. Can you put up his book, his latest book, the Anti-Semite Next Door?
That's the book. I gotta go this way. Okay, there.
And I just want to read what it says. It's a masterclass in suspense and legal drama. Bello's skillful blend of authentic courtroom strategies and edge of your seat storytelling makes this book impossible to put down. And can attest to that. Like I said, I had to struggle not to finish reading the book because I didn't want to give away any spoilers. I love the cast of characters and the diversity. I mean, you've got a private investigator in the book that struggles with pornography addiction.
Michael Love is one of my favorite characters.
Yes.
Both he and Zachary have come a long way from book 1 to book 9, and it was a very interesting process for them to get there. And that's essentially that's about all I'm going to say about it. But he's an overweight, underfed sex addict who is addicted to porn, but he's also the best private investigator
there is, yeah,
in Michigan.
And Zachary Blake has made him a millionaire.
Well, he cut Zachary Blake off for non-payment in betrayal of faith, and Zachary basically begged him to do the private investigating work on a contingency fee basis in book 1, and you can guess how that worked out by the fact that they're still together in book 9. But the growth of those characters over the 9-book series is one of the fun things about writing novels using the same characters. You mentioned the other 2 books I wrote that are not Zachary Blake novels, and it was fun to write a couple of things that were not Zachary Blake. I wrote a couple of children's books also, one on distracted driving and one on bullying. And those were fun because they weren't Zachary Blake. Right. But I'm not going to deny that Zachary Blake isn't fun to write. And it's also fun to develop him from point A to point. Now, what is the 9th letter in the alphabet? J? I think J is 10.
J. No, J
H,
would be 9.
H. J is 9?
J is 9, yeah.
Okay. So from point A to point J.
Don't fact check me on that, but I'm pretty sure it's J.
I think J is 10, but I think I might be wrong.
Let's see, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. You're right. I. It's I.
H, I? I. Yeah, okay.
I.
I skipped I. I said H, you said J. We were right in the middle of the two. As a Jewish person, obviously, anti-Semitism is a big issue going on in America right now. And since I'm somebody who has written books on cops oppressing Black Americans, on bullying and school shooting, on anti-Muslim sentiment and bias, writing about anti-Semitism is the ultimate self-interested rip from the headlines topic.
Yeah.
So after writing essentially for others, I wrote this one for myself.
Yeah. And there's a clear, I think that really kind of comes through in the novel as well. The personal nature of it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, Zachary Blake is a melting pot of many, many lawyers who I have encountered in my life, and the success that he has achieved over the 9 book series far exceeds anything that I accomplish as a lawyer. And I'm not knocking myself as a lawyer. I was a good lawyer, but Zachary Blake is in the upper echelon 0.5% of outstanding lawyers. And he is not necessarily a committed or practicing Jew, but he's very culturally
Right.
and very emotionally Jewish. And I would say that part of him, although I'm a little more religious than he is, that part of him definitely comes from me. I would say some of Micah Love's shtick and characteristics come from me as well, but not the pornography obsession.
Hey, no shame here.
Well, there is a person who I know that does apply to, and
Uh-oh.
he or she, I'm not going to say, may or may not know who they are, but Micah is the comic relief. Aside from being a great private investigator, but the two of them together is it's fun to write that relationship. I enjoy it.
I want to ask you, if Zachary Blake were a real person, what kind of cases would he take on in today's world, do you think?
The ones that we've been talking about. He handled the case against the church. He handled a young Muslim woman in book 2 being falsely accused of a crime. And her conviction, her potential conviction, was cheerled by the President of the United States. He wanted to use the case and the crime as the poster child for his anti-Muslim ban and his desire to start deporting Muslims from the United States. And that was essentially the topic of book 2. Book 3 was about a white supremacist who is chased. It's kind of a follow-up to the second book. And a Dearborn, Michigan cop. Dearborn, by the way, if you don't know, I'm talking about, the books are on the screen right now, and I'm talking about Betrayal in Blue.
Right.
He gets accused of murdering, the cop does, the white supremacist, and in a small town up north in Michigan. And instead of helping him exonerate himself, the small town police in the northern Michigan city turn on him and pursue him, hence the title Betrayal in Blue. So it's not just a cop chasing a bad white supremacist and the white supremacist meeting his fate, but the cops turning on other cops. The fourth book is a book about a police traffic stop that goes horribly wrong. It's based on the Philando Castile case, if you remember it,
Yes,
in
very much.
Minnesota. It's not the same case, but it kind of based on it. The fifth book is a school shooting, and it highlights the topic of bullying and how Zachary might have used bullying as a defense in a criminal case, but also how to obtain justice for the victims in a shooting case because of the negligence of the high school and the school board. So it's the two books, 4 and 5, Betrayal High and Betrayal in Black. I got the reverse. Black is 4, high is 5. Cop, traffic stop shooting, school shooting. It basically talks about how the legal system might handle those two types of cases.
Right.
Supreme Betrayal is a return to my, that's book 6, is a return to my political topic. A very conservative Supreme Court justice candidate is appointed by the bad guy president in book. No, I take it back. He's appointed by a conservative president, and it turns out he has a sexual assault in his past. So you could see the correlation with
Justice Kavanaugh.
with today, right? And again, I same thing happened. I got accused of the whole hit job thing, and I made it very clear to anybody who would listen that my guy isn't Kavanaugh, and he's probably the most evil character I've ever created. The judge in Supreme Betrayal, and he's not Brett Kavanaugh. And I've shouted it from the rooftops, but I still get accused of doing a hit job on Brett Kavanaugh. Betrayal at the Border, book 7, is a critical look at the immigration crisis from two different perspectives. One being at the southern border, but the other being a naturalized citizen who goes to Kobani, Syria to visit family and gets kidnapped by ISIS and held for ransom. And Zachary is sent to Kobani to negotiate the release of the hostage. And the book goes back and forth from on the two issues, and it's a good look at the types of border crises that we don't even think about when we just say, send them back,
Yeah.
split them up. There's a lot going on, and Betrayal at the Border is a very good look at kind of the other side of the immigration crisis. I indicated earlier that You Have the Right to Remain Silent is the 8th book. It does have a political slant, but it's much more of a whodunit than a political or legal commentary like the other ones. And then the one that you've been looking at, The Anti-Semite Next Door, is a book about what happens when the radical right takes its rhetoric and turns it into action.
Yeah.
And the question, obviously, from the title, is whether or not a white supremacist might be hiding next door. One of Zachary Blake's best friends is the victim of a rather nasty anti-Semitic attack, and the chief suspect turns out to be his next door neighbor. The question throughout the book is whether or not he's actually the guy. I'm not going to give that away. If you put up the if you put up the cover again, you'll see that there's a question mark on the cover. It's not. It wasn't. Now the question mark eventually, because publishers told me to do it, it eventually got taken off. It's now just the Anti-Semite Next Door. But what I was trying to do when I put a question mark on it was, is the guy next door really an anti-Semite? And that question is not answered right away, which is why I put the question mark in there. But I got overruled. Everybody told me to take it out. So,
well, don't give it away yet because I haven't finished reading the book specifically because
I'm not giving anything away. I'm not. Spoiler alert. No. Among his biggest protectors were the victims. They have no doubt in their mind that he's not the guy. They're certain that he's innocent. In fact, the way Blake gets involved in the case is a neighbor calls him and asks him to represent the suspect. And Zachary Blake becomes the lawyer for the accused anti-Semite. So that's a little twist for you.
Yeah,
you got to that part, right?
Barely. So don't go beyond. Like I said,
right. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, I have a nasty habit of doing that to my guests by accident, not on purpose. But I finished reading the book and I tend to give away the ending, not intentionally.
Don't do that.
And so my producer has advised me, don't finish the book until after the show, and then you can finish the book. That way, you're just as surprised as everybody else.
It was a very hard book for me to write.
I was going to ask you about that.
Because don't get me wrong. I don't like. I think I've made it pretty clear by the topics I've chosen that injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere.
Yeah.
And if it's happening to a Muslim, it can easily happen to a Jew. If it's happening to a black man, it can easily happen to a white man. And just because you're polar opposites now doesn't mean you don't share being a minority in common.
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
These kinds of things can happen to anybody. Right now, the hot topic is anti-southern border immigrant and anti-Semitism. And I've written about both, but I don't experience bigotry at the border. They do. Southern border immigrants do. I don't experience people saying that I eat cats and dogs. Haitians experience that. But I have experienced this, and writing about it was both a labor of love for my people and a very difficult process to research. I mean, I kind of know they hate me, but I never realized until I really delved into it how much they hate me, and that was troubling. I also think that this whole notion, if I can get on my Israel soapbox for a second, on October 7th, a sovereign country was invaded and 1,400 of its citizens were killed. Some of them were Arabs. I would imagine that those people who are criticizing Israel right now for genocide, who maybe live in Mississippi, would feel differently if Florida attacked them or if Louisiana attacked them. That's the equivalent of Gaza attacking Israel. It's your next door neighbor crossing your border and slaughtering your people. And Hamas cares so little about their own people that they're willing to hide in hospitals behind patients, hide in schools behind children and students and teachers, hide in neighborhoods behind citizens. And when Israel goes after them and kills a citizen or two in the process, it's not Hamas's fault, it's Israel's fault. Now, having said all that, if Israel could do this in a way that was more compassionate, I'm all for it. If Israel could kill less citizens, or civilians rather, I'm all for it. But until people start blaming Hamas for what's happening first and Israel second, then to me, it's just common everyday anti-Semitism. It's because the Jewish state is doing this, not because the state is defending itself. And there's a different standard, quite frankly, in my opinion, when it's Jews. If it wasn't Jews, it would be much more acceptable. Ukraine just attacked Russia legitimately, in my opinion, but you could argue that Ukraine sending United States heavy armory into Russia and killing people is kind of the same thing Israel did. Why did they do it? Because they're protecting their country. They were invaded. Yet nobody is saying to Ukraine, you just killed a bunch of innocent Russians.
Yeah.
The aggressor in this case, Ukraine and Russia, is Russia. The aggressor in Israel, Gaza to Israel, is Gaza and Hamas. So, to me, I'm not going to say none of the criticism is justified. I just legitimized it a little bit. But let's just remember who got attacked. And I believe there's a huge amount of anti-Semitism related to this whole anti-Israel protest movement, to the point where they voted for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. So you may have a different view, but that's my view. And the Anti-Semite Next Door was written before October 7th, so it's not related to that incident. I don't know if I'm trying to think if any parts of it were written after the attack, but I don't think so. I'd have to look at the release date. But I was basically commenting on the stuff that was going on in the United States. Charlottesville, Nazi marches, Howell, Michigan used to be the Ku Klux Klan capital of Michigan, or of the country, I think even. The Grand Poobah lived in Howell, Michigan. So this is nothing new in our country. There's been anti-Semitic stuff going on since the founding of America.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And, we're a very small minority of people. The one I love the most is that the Jews own everything, and
Huh,
you
right.
know, we're a 2% minority in this country. 2%. I think blacks and Muslims outnumber us by hundreds of percents. It's not even close. And again, the only country that would be criticized for defending itself against a terrorist attack, even though Hamas isn't specifically on the terrorist watch list, which is why they get away with this shit. The UN doesn't criticize Hamas like they criticize Hezbollah, because Hezbollah is on the terrorist list. I don't know if you're aware of that or not, but Hamas is not, Hezbollah is. So you don't hear about the whole Syria, Lebanon thing as much as you do about Gaza, because they can call Hezbollah a terrorist and they can't call Gaza a terrorist. A sad little commentary on rhetoric rather than reality.
Right. Well, we're out of time, so I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. I could talk.
Wow,
to you
that was 2 hours. That was 2 hours. Wow.
That was 2 hours. So I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. I've had such a great conversation, and I'm going to ask you to stay on for just a few minutes longer after the show wraps, because I want to talk to you about your podcast real quick.
Happy to do that.
And for everybody else, we will see you next Tuesday for our final episode of the season. This has been Coup Save America.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thank you for coming.